In this episode, I want to talk about the ins and outs in vitamin E and why it's so important in horses and why it's becoming more common that horses are deficient in vitamin E. I want to invite you to join me in the Hale and Hardy Horse Collective, where every week we take a holistic look at health and soundness issues that affect the daily lives of the horses we love. So vitamin E is actually one of the most important nutrients in equine health, particularly for muscle and nervous system function. And despite how critical it is, vitamin E deficiency is actually quite common in the modern horse. To understand why, we need to start with what vitamin E actually does in the body. So vitamin E is a fat-soluble antioxidant. And antioxidants protect cells from damage caused by molecules called free radicals. So every time cells produce energy, they also generate these unstable molecules. So in small amounts, this is normal, but when the free radicals accumulate, they can actually damage the cell membrane, the DNA, and even proteins. So this process is called oxidative stress. And oxidative stress occurs when the body produces more free radicals than it can safely neutralize. Free radicals are unstable molecules just created during normal metabolism, exercise, inflammation, and even in immune responses. Because they're unstable, they react with nearby cells and can damage cell membranes, proteins, and DNA. Over time, this damage accumulates and can impair how tissues function, particularly in organs with high metabolic activity, like muscles and nerves. Antioxidants such as vitamin E act as a protective defense system by stabilizing these free radicals before they injure the cells. In horses, adequate antioxidant protection is especially important because athletic work, growth, illness, and environmental stress can all increase oxidative stress. Free radicals are a natural byproduct of aerobic metabolism, which is how cells produce energy. So every cell in the body is constantly making energy using inside structures called the mitochondria. These are structures inside the cell. During this process, electrons are transferred along what's called the electron transport chain to generate ATP, the energy that the cell uses. But this system's not perfectly efficient, and so a small percentage of the oxygen molecules become partially reduced and form a reactive oxygen species, or what we call these free radicals. So that just gives you a little idea of how the free radicals are being produced in the horse's body. And then what can we do about it? This happens continuously because life requires oxygen metabolism. So as long as cells are producing energy, a small amount of free radicals will be produced, no matter what you do. Even though we try and limit free radical production in our horses and actually in ourselves. In fact, these free radicals are not only unavoidable, but they can be useful in small amounts. So free radicals play roles in immune defense, in cell signaling, and in normal metabolic regulation. For example, immune cells actually generate free radicals intentionally to help destroy bacteria and pathogens. The body's actually designed to handle this quite well. It maintains a balance between the free radical production and the antioxidants and the defenses of the antioxidants like vitamin E, vitamin C, glutathione, and enzymes. Oxidative stress occurs only when the balance is disrupted, either because the free radical production increases or the antioxidant defenses are insufficient. So in horses, this imbalance can happen during intense exercise, rapid growth, inflammation, illness, or nutritional deficiencies such as low vitamin E. So free radical production is normal, but problems arise when the body can't neutralize them effectively. So how does vitamin E play a role in all of this? Vitamin E's job is to neutralize those free radicals before they can damage tissues. It's especially important in tissues that have high metabolic activity, and two of the most metabolically active tissues in the body are the muscle and nervous tissue. That's why vitamin E deficiency most commonly shows up in problems affecting the musculoskeletal system and the nervous system. So let's talk about where horses can get vitamin E naturally. So in a natural environment, horses get vitamin E from fresh grass. Actively growing pasture contains a high concentration of vitamin E, especially in a bioactively form called alpha-tocopherol. So this is the best way and the most bioavailable way for your horses to get vitamin E. So horses that graze on healthy pasture regularly usually meet their daily requirements without any supplementation. The problem arises with our modern management practices. So vitamin E is extremely sensitive to oxidation and light. And so once grass is cut and turned into hay, the vitamin E content begins to degrade almost immediately. So after several months of storage, your hay may only contain a very little bit of usable vitamin E for your horses. So horses that don't get turnout or have limited turnout and are primarily on hay, especially if they're stalled or in dry lots or in climates where the pasture is limited during winter, these horses often don't receive adequate amounts of vitamin E from their diet. So over time, this can lead to a deficiency. So one of the reasons that vitamin E is so important is because of its role in protecting nerve cells. Neurons have membranes rich in lipids, which makes them especially vulnerable to oxidative stress and oxidative damage. When vitamin E levels are low, this oxidative stress can damage the cells. So this brings us to several important neurologic diseases in horses and how vitamin E can play a role in their development, in management, and treatment. So one condition associated with vitamin E deficiency is equine neuroaxonal dystrophy, often abbreviated ENAD, along with a closely related condition called equine degenerative myeloencephalopathy, or EDM. These are developmental neurologic disorders that typically affect young horses. They involve degeneration of specific areas of the nervous system responsible for coordination and proprioception. So basically, the horse's ability to know where its body is in space. Affected horses can appear uncoordinated or ataxic. You might notice abnormal gait patterns, difficulty placing the feet correctly, trouble backing up, or just general clumsiness that seems out of proportion to the horse's training or condition. Research suggests these conditions involve genetic susceptibility combined with vitamin E deficiency during early development. In other words, the deficiency does not necessarily cause the disease by itself, but inadequate antioxidant protection during these critical developmental periods allows the oxidative damage to occur in vulnerable horses. I hope that makes sense. That's why vitamin E is especially important for growing horses. Foals and young horses are developing muscle and nervous tissue quite rapidly, and their metabolic demands are high, and their cells are particularly vulnerable to oxidative stress. So adequate vitamin E helps protect developing neurons and support healthy muscle function during growth. But vitamin E can also affect your adult horses. Low vitamin E has been associated with muscle weakness, poor top-line development, decreased exercise intolerance, and difficulty recovering from work. In severe cases, deficiency has been linked to equine motor neuron disease, or EMND. EMND affects the motor neurons responsible for controlling muscle contraction. Horses with this condition may show progressive muscle wasting, trembling, weakness, and difficulty maintaining posture. Again, oxidative damage to nerve cells appears to play a significant role here. So the next question becomes, how do we supplement with vitamin E properly? So first, it's important to understand that not all vitamin E supplements are the same. And you cannot rely on the vitamin E in your feed bag to give your horse the proper amounts of vitamin E. Most of the time, the vitamin E in your feed is going to be synthetic, so not well absorbed. It's going to be in low doses, and it's probably going to have degraded too much while being in storage. So then let's talk about supplementing with vitamin E. So on your supplement labels, you're going to have two different kinds of vitamin E listed. You'll have synthetic vitamin E, which is listed as DL alpha-tocopherol, or you'll have natural vitamin E, which is listed as D alpha-tocopherol. The natural form is significantly more bioavailable, meaning the horses absorb it and utilize it much more efficiently. There are also water-dispersible liquid forms of D-alpha-tocopherol, which are absorbed even more readily, and so they're often used in horses requiring higher therapeutic doses during illness or when treating some of these neurologic diseases. Daily supplementation levels depend on your horse's diet, their access to pasture, and their health status. For most horses without access to fresh pasture, veterinarians commonly recommend around 1,000 to 2,000 IUs per day as just the bare maintenance level. Performance horses or horses under higher metabolic stress may benefit from 2,000 to 5,000 IU per day. And when a blood test confirmed deficiency or when neurologic disease is present, veterinarians often prescribe 5,000 to 10,000 IU per day, especially using the natural and water-dispersible forms. In some neurologic cases, the therapeutic levels have reached from 10,000 to 15,000 IU per day for a short period of time under the veterinary supervision until they can get the levels normalized in that horse. But for most of you, unless your horse is really fighting something, and if it is, you're going to be contacting your veterinarian, you're going to be staying probably in that 2,000 to 5,000 IU range. So as it's been explained to me, is that the horse will absorb the vitamin E faster when it's in the water-soluble form, but that it's not necessarily better for total absorption. So fortunately, vitamin E is pretty safe to supplement with. Toxicity is extremely rare in horses. However, excessively high doses over long periods may theoretically interfere with other fat-soluble vitamins, so supplementation should still be guided by clinical need and ideally supported by blood testing. So you don't really have to be ultra careful about over-supplementation with vitamin E, but you still want to follow the recommendations for the daily amount. So when we go to testing blood for vitamin E, we're going to be looking for the levels to fall around 2 to 4 micrograms per milliliter. And many veterinarians aim for levels about 3 micrograms per milliliter, especially in horses with neurologic concerns. So what I want you to take away from this is vitamin E is not an optional supplement. It's a critical antioxidant that protects muscle and nerve tissue. It supports proper neurologic development in young horses, and it helps prevent serious disease when adequate levels are maintained. And because modern management often removes horses from fresh pasture that they were evolved to graze in, it's a nutrient that deserves careful attention in many feeding programs. Now, we're not going to get into today with metabolic horses and their consumption of grass, but of course, they would be one that you would want to supplement vitamin E with if there are any horse that is only fed hay on a dry lot or does not have access to good fresh grass pasture. You're going to want to supplement your horse. I find that most veterinarians either recommend the Elevate vitamin E, and that comes in a liquid and a powdered form, or the Nano vitamin E that comes in the liquid form. So if you're looking for which ones to supplement with, those are the two that I see most recommended by veterinarians. Okay, it's a short one today, so thank you guys all for joining me, but I just really wanted to kind of get everybody on the same level when we start talking about vitamin E. And I'll see you guys next time.